December 15th, 1889. The morning frost clung to everything in Elkhorn Crossing, Wyoming, like a shroud. The kind of cold that bites through wool and settles deep in the bones. The kind that makes a man think about endings. Cole Thornton stood before his wife's grave, a Colt revolver heavy in his right hand. 4 months. 4 months since Margaret had slipped away, fever burning through her like wildfire through dry timber. 4 months of waking to silence so profound it felt like drowning. 4 months of reaching across cold sheets, finding nothing but the ghost of lavender that still clung to her pillow. The gun felt right in his palm, familiar. He'd carried one just like it through Antietam, through Gettysburg, through all those blood-soaked fields where boys became corpses and the living envied the dead. He'd survived the war, survived when better men hadn't. But surviving wasn't the same as living, and Cole Thornton hadn't truly lived since the October morning when Margaret stopped breathing. He sat down in the snow, placed the revolver across his lap, looked at the small photograph he kept in his coat pocket. Margaret on their wedding day, golden hair catching the sunlight, smile brighter than any Wyoming summer. She'd wanted children, tried for years, never happened. Maybe that was mercy, Cole thought. Maybe God knew what was coming. His finger found the trigger. Just pressure, just a choice. 1 second of courage, and he'd be with her again. Then, cutting through the frozen morning air like a cry for help, came the long, mournful wail of a train whistle. Cole's hand jerked away from the trigger. His heart pounded. The whistle came again, distant but insistent, calling from the direction of town. Hoofbeats. Cole looked up to see Tom Walker riding hard across the snow, his deputy's badge catching the weak morning light. Tom was 38. Had known Cole since before the war, and right now his face carried the kind of urgency that made Cole's old soldier instincts kick in. Tom reined in his horse, breathing hard. He looked at Cole, at the gun, at the grave. His eyes filled with something that might have been grief, or might have been anger, or might have been both. "Cole," Tom said, and his voice was careful, the way you'd talk to a man standing on a cliff edge. "I know where you are. I know what you're thinking." Cole said nothing, just held the gun, feeling its weight. "There's something happening at the train station," Tom continued. "Orphan train from New York. They got 7 children standing on that platform like livestock at auction. And Cole, they got signs pinned to their coats, paper signs with words on them. Words that'd break your heart." "Not my business," Cole heard himself say, but his voice sounded hollow, even to his own ears. "They're pinning labels on children," Tom said, and now anger crept into his voice. "Calling them troublemakers and defective and unwanted. 7 kids, Cole. The oldest one can't be more than 14, and she's standing there trying to protect the little ones while the whole damn town just watches." Cole looked at the gun in his hand, then at Margaret's grave. "She'd want you to go," Tom said quietly. "You know she would." The name hit like a physical blow. Cole's hands clenched. "Get out." "Cole," I said, "get out." Tom held his ground for another moment, then turned his horse and rode away, leaving Cole alone with the dead and the dying. The train whistle sounded again, longer this time, more insistent. Cole sat there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The gun grew cold in his hands. The whistle kept calling. And somewhere in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 4 months began to crack. He'd been planning to die today, been certain of it. But maybe, just maybe, there was something he needed to do first. Cole stood, holstered the revolver, and walked to where his horse, Dusty, waited. The big buckskin gelding whickered softly, patient as always. Cole swung into the saddle, and without quite knowing why, turned the horse toward town. The ride to Elkhorn Crossing took an hour through frozen trails. Cole kept his head down, collar up, trying not to think about what he was doing or why. The town emerged from the gray afternoon like a wound in the landscape. 40 buildings, maybe 50. General store, saloon, church with a crooked steeple, and the train station where a crowd had gathered despite the bitter cold. Cole tied Dusty to a post and walked toward the platform. He heard them before he saw them. "Get your hands off me!" A girl's voice, sharp with fury and fear. "Don't you touch her!" Another voice, younger, desperate. The crowd formed a loose circle, the way people do when they want to watch something but don't want to get too close. Cole pushed through, his height giving him advantage, and what he saw made his blood turn to ice. 7 children, huddled together on the train platform like frightened animals. Their clothes were thin, meant for eastern cities, not Wyoming winters. Their faces were hollow with hunger and exhaustion. And pinned to each of their threadbare coats were paper signs, stark white with black letters. The oldest was a girl, maybe 14, with red-brown hair coming loose from its braid and fire in her eyes. She stood with her arms spread wide, shielding 6 smaller children behind her. The sign on her coat read, "Troublemaker." A boy, 12 years old, silent as a shadow, dark hair, watching everything with eyes that had seen too much. His sign, "Defective." A blonde girl, 10, trying desperately to smile despite the tears on her cheeks. Sickly. A freckle-faced boy of 9, vibrating with barely contained energy. Wild. A serious girl of 7 who watched everything with unnatural calm. Strange. A tiny girl of 5 pressed so close to the oldest she might have been trying to disappear. Mute. And the smallest, a golden-haired child of 4, clutching a ragged doll, her blue-gray eyes wide and lost. Unknown. Cole felt something twist in his chest, something that might have been rage, might have been grief, might have been both. A man in an expensive coat, Silas Blackwood, the richest landowner in the county, had his hand wrapped around the arm of the freckled boy. "This one looks strong enough," Blackwood was saying to the woman beside him. "Could use another hand in the mines." "He's not going anywhere without me," the oldest girl said, and her voice was pure steel wrapped in terror. Blackwood turned and backhanded her across the face. The girl hit the platform hard. The smaller children screamed. Blood ran from her split lip. And something inside Cole Thornton, something that had been frozen solid since Margaret died, cracked wide open. He moved before he could think about it. 3 long strides and he was there, his hand closing around Blackwood's wrist with enough force to make bones creak. The man cried out, tried to pull away. Cole held fast. "Let him go," Cole said, and his voice was quiet, deadly quiet. The voice he'd used in the war when everything was about to go to hell. Blackwood's face went red. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "I'm a man who just watched you strike a child." Cole's voice stayed calm, stayed level, but his grip tightened. "And I think if you don't take your hands off that boy right now, you're going to find out exactly what I learned at Antietam." The crowd had gone silent. Blackwood's eyes darted to the people around him, looking for support, finding none. He released the boy. The child scrambled backward immediately, pressing himself against the older girl who had struggled back to her feet. Cole let go of Blackwood's wrist, turned to face the man fully. "These children aren't property," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They're human beings, They're wards of the Children's Aid Society, a woman's voice cut in. Eleanor Harwick, 45 and severe in black wool, stepped forward. And you have no legal right to interfere. I have the right that comes from being human, Cole said. Mrs. Harwick's lips pressed into a thin line. These children have been assessed by trained professionals. The labels are for transparency, so families know what they're taking on. Cole looked at the children properly for the first time. Really looked. 7 faces turned toward him with varying degrees of fear and desperate hope. The oldest girl held her ground, blood on her lip, eyes filled with a suspicion born from too many broken promises. The boy, called defective, watched with stillness that spoke of trauma too deep for words. The others clustered close, seeking safety in numbers, knowing there was no safety anywhere. Cole walked to the oldest girl, slowly, giving her time to flinch away if she wanted to. She didn't. She held perfectly still, chin lifted, as he reached out and unpinned the paper from her coat. Troublemaker. He crumpled it in his fist, then moved to the next child, unpinned, defective, crushed it. Then, sickly, wild, strange, mute, unknown. Each label torn away, each lie destroyed. When he was done, he let the papers fall to the platform. The wind caught them, scattered them like dead leaves. "These children," Cole said, loud enough for the whole crowd to hear, "are not unwanted." Blackwood laughed. "Then I suppose you're going to take them? All 7? A bachelor rancher who can barely keep his own stock alive." The words came out before Cole could stop them, before he could think about what he was saying, what he was promising. But the moment they left his lips, he knew they were true. "That's exactly what I'm going to do." The crowd erupted in murmurs. The older girl's eyes went wide. The smaller children pressed closer together, as if afraid to believe what they'd heard. "You're insane," Blackwood said flatly. "Maybe." Cole crouched down, bringing himself eye level with the oldest girl. Up close he could see the exhaustion carved into her young face, the weight of responsibility she'd been carrying for God knew how long. "What's your name?" She hesitated, gaze flicking to the children behind her, then back to him. "Rose," she said finally. "Rose Whitmore." Rose. He let the name settle between them. "I'm Cole Thornton. I've got a ranch about an hour north of here. 500 acres, big house, empty rooms." He paused. "Too empty." "Why?" Rose's voice cracked. "Why would you take us? You don't know us. You don't know what they say about us, the things we've done, the trouble we—" "I know what I saw." Cole kept his voice steady. "I saw a girl ready to fight a grown man to protect her family. I saw children who've been told they're worthless by people who never bothered to look past a piece of paper." He straightened. "I'm not asking you to trust me. Trust takes time. But I'm offering you a roof, beds, food, and I'm offering you a choice." "A choice?" Rose's voice was barely a whisper. "You can come with me and see if maybe things can be different. Or you can stay here and wait for someone else to decide your future." He held her gaze. "It's up to you, Rose. All of you." Rose turned to look at the children behind her. The silent boy Danny watched with eyes that saw too much. The blonde girl Emma was crying quiet tears. The freckled Mickey had his fists clenched like he was ready to fight the world. Little Sophia stood perfectly still, lips moving in what might have been prayer. Lily clung to Rose's coat with both hands, and the smallest one, Annie, had her face buried against Lily's shoulder, Rose knelt down, whispered something to each of them, listened to their responses, watched their faces. Then she stood and faced Cole. "If you hurt any of them," she said quietly, "I will kill you in your sleep." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. "Fair enough," Cole said. Behind them, a new voice spoke up. "Excuse me, I'm a doctor." A woman pushed through the crowd. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, 32, hair pulled back efficiently, wire-rimmed glasses, medical bag in hand. She knelt beside Rose. "May I look at that cut?" Rose hesitated, then nodded. Sarah cleaned the wound gently with a clean cloth. "Not serious, but it'll swell. Here." She handed Rose a small tin of salve. "Twice a day. 3 days and you'll be fine." "Thank you, ma'am," Rose said. Sarah stood, turned to Cole. "Mr. Thornton, isn't it? I'm new to town, just opened to practice." "Doctor from where?" "Boston. But the East has enough doctors. I heard the West needed more." She paused. "These children need medical examinations. After such a long journey. I could visit your ranch next week?" "We'd appreciate that, Doctor." "Call me Sarah." Their eyes met, held for a moment longer than necessary. Tom Walker appeared, eyes twinkling with mischief. "Cole, need any help?" "No," Cole said shortly. Tom borrowed a wagon from Clara Henderson at the general store. They loaded it with blankets and what supplies Cole could gather on short notice. The children huddled together in the back, wrapped in wool, breath fogging in the frozen air. Rose sat at the front with Cole, back straight as a board, eyes fixed on the trail ahead. She hadn't spoken since they'd left town. "The boy who doesn't talk," Cole said finally. "Danny. Is he mute like the little one?" "No." Rose's voice was clipped. "He can talk. He chooses not to." "Why?" "That's his business." Cole nodded slowly. He understood about keeping secrets, about things that lived in your chest that you couldn't put into words. "The small one," he tried again. "Annie. Her label said unknown. What does that mean?" Rose's jaw tightened. "Means nobody knows where she came from. She was on the train when it left New York, but she wasn't on the society's list. No papers, no records, nothing. Just a little girl in a blue dress holding a doll." "And you took her in anyway." "What else was I supposed to do? Leave her?" "No," Cole said. "You did right." Something in Rose's posture softened just slightly, but her voice stayed hard. "You should know something, Mr. Thornton. We've been through 12 placements in 2 years. 12 families who decided we were too much trouble, too many mouths to feed, too wild, too strange, too broken. Every single one of them made promises at the start, and every single one of them broke them. I'm not them." That's what they all said. Cole didn't argue. He couldn't. She was right to be suspicious, right to guard her heart and the hearts of those children she'd been protecting for so long. All he could do was prove her wrong, one day at a time. The ranch house loomed out of the twilight like a ghost made of wood and memory. Cole pulled the wagon up to the porch. Behind him, small voices stirred. "This is your place?" Mickey's voice was full of disbelief. "All of it? It's huge." "It's cold," Rose said flatly. "Look at the chimney, no smoke. When's the last time you had a fire going?" The question stung more than it should have. Cole didn't answer. He led them inside, and the cold emptiness of the place hit him fresh. The dark hearth, the dishes in the basin, the dust on every surface. the curtains still drawn against a world he hadn't wanted to face. Right. He moved to the fireplace, grabbing kindling. I'll get this going. Danny appeared beside him without a sound. The boy knelt down and began arranging wood with practiced efficiency. Their eyes met briefly. Cole nodded his thanks. Together, in silence, they built a fire. The flames caught, grew, began to fill the room with warmth and light. Annie wandered to the mantel, stood staring at something there. Cole followed her gaze and felt his heart stop. Margaret's photograph, the one from their wedding day. He'd forgotten to hide it like he'd hidden everything else that hurt too much to look at. "Pretty lady," Annie said softly, her first words since the station. "Yes," Cole's voice came out rough. She was. "Where is she?" The question, innocent and devastating, hung in the air. "She's gone, sweetheart. Passed away a few months ago." Annie nodded slowly, processing this with the simple acceptance of the very young. Then she looked up at him with those strange, familiar, blue-gray eyes. "My mama went away too," she said. "But she said someone would take care of me. She promised. She had a picture like that one. Said it was her sister. Said her sister would find me someday." The room went very still. Rose was staring at him, at Annie, back at him. "Mr. Thornton," Rose said slowly, "your wife, did she have a sister?" Cole couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at the small, golden-haired child who looked so much like Margaret it made his whole body ache. "Yes," he heard himself say. "Emily. Younger by 3 years. She went to California before we were married. We lost contact." The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. Emily had written once, years ago, said she'd gotten married, said she was happy. Then silence. Margaret had worried, had wanted to go find her, but the journey was long and expensive, and there was always something else that needed doing first. And now Margaret was gone. And Emily was gone too, apparently. But Emily's daughter was standing in his living room, looking at him with his dead wife's eyes. "Oh, God," Cole breathed. "Oh, dear God." That night, after simple food was made and eaten, after beds were assigned and children settled, Cole sat alone in the kitchen with Margaret's photograph. The house wasn't silent anymore. He could hear breathing from upstairs, soft movements, the sounds of 7 children trying to find rest in a strange place. "You sent her to me," Cole whispered to the photograph. "Didn't you? You sent them all to me." The photograph didn't answer. Margaret's smile remained frozen, unchanged. Outside, the Wyoming wind howled. But inside, the fire burned steady and warm. And for the first time in 4 months, Cole Thornton had a reason to keep it burning. The first morning came too soon and too loud. Cole woke to the sound of shattering glass and a child's scream. His body moved before his mind caught up, old war instincts taking over as he bolted from his bed and down the hall. His hand went automatically to where his gun belt would have been, finding nothing, and the absence reminded him that this wasn't Antietam, this wasn't a battlefield. This was his home, and somewhere in it, one of his children was in trouble. His children. The thought struck him as he hit the stairs. When had he started thinking of them that way? The kitchen was a disaster. Mickey stood frozen in the center, a shattered jar of preserves at his feet, red jam spreading across the floorboards like spilled blood. The boy's freckled face had gone white as fresh snow, his whole body trembling. "I didn't mean to," Mickey whispered, and his voice was so small, so terrified. "I was just hungry. I didn't mean to. Please don't." He flinched backward, arms coming up to shield his head, and Cole understood with sickening clarity what the boy was expecting, what he'd been taught to expect when he made a mistake. "Mickey?" Cole kept his voice low, even, the way you'd speak to a spooked horse. "Look at me." The boy's arms stayed up, his whole body coiled tight as a spring, ready to snap. "Mickey, I'm not going to hit you. I need you to hear that. I'm not going to hit you." Slowly, so slowly, Mickey lowered his arms. His eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying. Cole suspected this was a boy who'd learned a long time ago that crying made things worse. "It was an accident," Cole said. "Accidents happen. You understand?" Mickey nodded, still tense, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Now, you said you were hungry. That's important. That means we need to get you fed proper. But first, we clean this up together. You know where the broom is?" "No, sir." "Pantry, left side. Go on and fetch it." Mickey moved like he expected a blow to come the moment his back was turned. But when none came, when he returned with the broom to find Cole already kneeling to pick up the larger pieces of glass, something in his rigid shoulders eased just a fraction. They cleaned the mess together in silence. When it was done, Cole stood and moved to the stove. "Eggs," he said. "Bacon, biscuits. That sound good?" "Yes, sir," Mickey said, and there was wonder in his voice, like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. Cole started cooking. The smell of bacon began to fill the kitchen, rich and savory, and one by one the other children appeared. Rose first, her hair wild from sleep, eyes sharp as she assessed the situation. Then Danny, slipping into a chair without a sound. Emma came next, yawning, with Sophia and Lily following close behind. Annie was last, clutching her ragged doll, golden hair tangled. 7 children at his kitchen table. 7 faces turned toward him, with varying degrees of suspicion and hope. Cole set plates down, one after another, loading them with eggs and bacon and fresh biscuits still warm from the oven. They stared at the food, then at each other, then at him. Sophia bowed her head slightly. "Lord, thank you for this meal and—" "Eat!" Mickey interrupted, too hungry to wait. "Mickey," Emma scolded, "let Sophia pray." "But I'm starving." "Enough," Cole said, and his voice was firm but not harsh. "Both of you. Sophia, pray quick, then we all eat." Sophia nodded, closed her eyes. "Lord, thank you for this food. Thank you for the kind man. Amen." "Amen," the others echoed, and then they ate. Cole watched them, watched the way they devoured the food like they hadn't had a decent meal in weeks. Maybe they hadn't. His throat tightened. How long had these children been hungry? How long had they been cold and scared and convinced nobody cared whether they lived or died? "After breakfast," he said, "we work. This ranch is big. Too big for one man. I need help. Mickey, Danny, you're with the horses. Rose, Emma, the house needs management. Sophia, pantry organization. Lily and Annie stay close to Rose." Rose looked at him carefully. "You're giving us chores. I'm giving you responsibilities. There's a difference." "Is there? Chores are what you make children do to keep them busy. Responsibilities are what you give people you're counting on to help." Cole met her gaze steadily. "I need help, Rose. This place is too much for one man. I thought I could manage it alone, but I was wrong. So yes, I'm asking all of you to work. but I'm not asking you to do anything I won't do myself." Rose studied him for a long moment. "And what do we get in return?" "Room and board, for starters. Education. I'll teach you all to read and write proper, those who don't know already. And when you're old enough, if you want to stay and work the ranch for real, I'll pay you fair wages, same as any hand." The table went silent. Rose's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or disbelief. "Nobody's ever offered us wages before," she said slowly. "Most families we stayed with treated us like free labor, worked us till we dropped, then threw us out when we got too troublesome. I'm not most families." "No," she studied him for another long moment. "I'm starting to see that." 4 days after the children arrived, a knock came at the door during the noon meal. Cole opened it to find Dr. Sarah Mitchell on the porch, medical bag in hand, snow dusting her dark coat. "I promised I'd check on them," she said simply. Cole stepped aside. "Come in, please." Sarah spent the next hour examining each child with efficient gentleness. She listened to Emma's lungs, frowning slightly at the wheeze, checked Mickey's reflexes and the faint scar on his temple from some old injury. When she examined Danny and saw the network of old scars across his back, her jaw tightened, but she said nothing in front of the boy. Lily submitted to the examination in silence, but didn't flinch when Sarah touched her, which seemed to surprise the doctor. Annie chattered throughout her checkup, telling Sarah all about her doll, Rosie. When she finished, Sarah joined Cole on the porch, away from small ears. "They're malnourished," she said quietly. "All of them. It'll take months of good meals to reverse the damage. Emma has asthma. She'll need to avoid cold air when possible, and I can show you how to use steam to help her breathe during attacks. I'll do whatever's needed." Sarah studied him with those sharp physician's eyes. "Danny's scars are old, years old, from beatings, repeated and severe. And Lily's silence, it's not physical, it's trauma, deep trauma." "I know." "Do you?" Sarah's voice was gentle but probing. "Because healing that kind of damage takes more than food and shelter. It takes time, patience, the kind of commitment most people can't sustain when things get difficult." Cole met her gaze steadily. "I'm not most people." A small smile touched Sarah's lips. "No, I'm beginning to see that." She picked up her bag. "I'll return in 2 weeks. Sooner if Emma has trouble breathing." "And Mr. Thornton?" "Cole?" "Yes?" "What you're doing here, it matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." After she left, Rose appeared beside him. "She's nice. She's a good doctor." "That's not what I meant." Rose's eyes held a knowing glint that made her look far older than 14. "She likes you. She's professional." "Uh-huh." Rose smiled slightly. "You know, it's okay if you like someone. Mrs. Margaret would want you to be happy." Cole didn't know how to respond to that, so he said nothing. But as he watched Sarah's buggy disappear down the snow-covered trail, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not love, not yet, but maybe, someday, the possibility of it. The barn was cold but dry, and the animals were restless after a night without proper attention. Cole walked Danny and Mickey through the morning routine, watering the horses, mucking the stalls, laying fresh hay. Danny moved with quiet competence, like he'd done this before, though he never said a word. Mickey threw himself into the work with reckless energy, talking constantly to fill the silence his companion wouldn't. "So this is your horse, Dusty. That's a good name. He's big. Is he fast?" "I bet he's fast. I used to know a guy who had a horse, but it wasn't this big, more like a pony, really. You ever ridden a pony?" "Ponies are mean." Meaner than big horses. At least that's what I heard. Hey, Danny, you ever ridden a pony? Danny shook his head, the ghost of amusement crossing his face. Yeah, me neither. But I want to learn to ride a real horse. A big one like this. You think Mr. Thornton would teach me? You think... Mickey, Cole's voice cut through the chatter. Breathe. The boy stopped, looking almost guilty. Sorry, I talk too much. Everyone says so. The lady at the orphanage said my mouth was going to get me killed someday. Said nobody wants a boy who won't shut up. She was wrong. Cole set down the hay bale he was carrying. Talking isn't a sin, and being curious isn't a character flaw. But there's a time for words, and a time for work. Right now, we work. Save the questions for supper. Mickey's whole face lit up like sunrise breaking over the mountains. You'll answer them? At supper? If I can. It was such a pure expression of hope that Cole had to look away, his chest tight. How long had it been since anyone had promised this boy anything? How many times had those promises been broken? Danny, who had been watching the exchange with those two perceptive eyes, moved closer to Mickey, not touching, not speaking, but present, supportive. These children protected each other, Cole realized. They were a unit, a family forged not by blood, but by shared suffering. Each one had a role. Rose, the leader, Danny, the silent guardian, Emma, the peacemaker, Mickey, the lightning rod, Sophia, the old soul, Lily, the shadow, Annie, the innocent. They'd survived by clinging to each other when the world tried to tear them apart. And now it was Cole's job to make sure they never had to cling so desperately again. Midday brought unexpected visitors. Cole heard the horses first, 3 of them, approaching at a steady trot. He set down the fence post he'd been working on and walked to the front of the house, one hand resting casually near his hip, where his revolver hung. Old habits from the war. Always know who's coming. Always be ready. Silas Blackwood sat astride a black stallion, flanked by 2 men Cole didn't recognize. Ranch hands from the look of them, with the hard eyes of men who followed orders without asking questions. Thornton? Blackwood's voice carried the oily smoothness of a man used to getting what he wanted. We need to talk. So talk. Blackwood dismounted, brushing dust from his expensive coat with theatrical care. I've been thinking about our conversation at the station yesterday. I may have been hasty. Those children are mine now. Are you certain about that? Blackwood smiled, showing too many teeth. You're a widower, Thornton. No wife, no family, no one to vouch for your character. The territorial court takes a dim view of single men trying to raise children, especially 7 of them, especially children who've already been labeled as problematic. Those labels were lies, and you know it. Do I? Blackwood spread his hands in a gesture of false innocence. I know what I saw. A girl who attacked me in public. A boy who refuses to speak. Children so strange that other children won't go near them. These aren't normal children, Thornton. They're damaged goods. Cole felt the old anger rising, the same anger that had carried him through the war, through the dark years after. He forced it down. Control. Always control. What do you want, Blackwood? Straight to business. I respect that. Blackwood moved closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Here's my offer. You give me the 2 boys. They're strong enough to be useful. I'll forget about the assault yesterday. I'll even throw in a good word with the territorial authorities when they come asking questions about your little experiment. No. Think carefully, Thornton. You're one man against the weight of the law. I have friends in the territorial government. Friends who would be very interested to hear that an unstable war veteran with no experience raising children has taken in 7 orphans without proper authorization. I have authorization. Papers filed with the court in Laramie. Blackwood's smile faltered just for a moment. Papers can be challenged, especially when there are concerns about the welfare of the children involved. Is that a threat? It's a friendly warning. Blackwood remounted his horse. I'm a patient man, Thornton. I can wait. But those children would be better off with families who know how to handle them. Families who can give them discipline, structure, purpose. The unspoken words hung in the air. Families who would work them in the mines until their bodies broke. Think about my offer, Blackwood said. I'll be back. He rode away, his men following. Cole watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned to find Rose standing on the porch. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. He's going to try to take us, isn't he? The families who got rid of us before, some of them were paid by men like him, men who wanted workers, not children. Not this time. How can you know that? Cole walked toward her, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. Because I've faced men like Blackwood before, in the war, in business, in every town I've ever lived in. Men who think they can take what they want, just because they have money and power. He held her gaze. And they all made the same mistake. They assumed that because I'm quiet, I'm weak. Because I don't make threats, I won't fight back. And will you? Fight back? I will fight back, Rose, for all of you. To my last breath, if that's what it takes. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, that would take longer, but something close to it. Recognition, maybe, of a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to protect the people who depended on you. The others are scared, she said quietly. Lily heard the horses and started crying. Annie's hiding under the bed. Even Danny looks worried, and he never looks worried. Gather them up, all of them. We're going to have a family meeting. The word family hung in the air between them. Rose's eyes widened slightly. Then she nodded and went inside. 7 children sat in the living room, arranged in their usual protective formation. Rose at the center, the others clustered around her like planets orbiting a sun. Cole stood by the fireplace, feeling the weight of their attention like a physical thing. I'm not going to lie to you, he said. The man who came here today, Blackwood, he wants to take some of you away, maybe all of you. He thinks because he's rich and powerful, he can do whatever he wants. Mickey's jaw tightened. Let him try. You'll do nothing except stay close to this house and your brothers and sisters. Cole's voice was firm, but not harsh. This isn't your fight, Mickey. It's mine. But, no buts. I'm the adult here. It's my job to protect you. Your job is to trust that I can. Trust. Rose's voice was bitter. We've trusted adults before. It never ends well. I know. Cole crouched down, bringing himself closer to their level. I know you've been let down. I know every promise that's ever been made to you has been broken. I know you've got no reason to believe me when I say I'm different. He paused, looking at each face in turn. Danny's guarded watchfulness, Emma's hopeful fear, Sophia's eerie calm, Mickey's coiled tension, Lily's silent terror, Annie's wide-eyed confusion, and Rose who carried all of them on her thin shoulders. But I'm asking you to give me a chance, Cole continued. Not forever, just for now. Just long enough for me to prove that I mean what I say. Can you do that? Silence fell heavy as snow. Then Annie slid off her chair and padded toward him, her ragged doll dangling from one hand. She stopped directly in front of him and tilted her small face up, studying him with the same quiet intensity he'd seen in Margaret 1,000 times. "The pretty lady in the picture," she said. "Was she nice?" Cole's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart. She was very nice." "She looks like my mama." Annie reached out and put her small hand on his cheek, the gesture so natural, so innocent. "Mama said to trust people who have kind eyes. You have kind eyes. Sad, but kind." Something inside Cole broke and mended at the same time. He covered Annie's small hand with his own. "Thank you, Annie. That means more than you know." The little girl smiled, bright and trusting, then climbed into his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Cole froze. He hadn't held a child since never. He and Margaret had never had the chance. But Annie settled against his chest with a small sigh of contentment, and something that had been locked tight inside him for months cracked open just a little bit more. "Well," Emma said softly, "I guess that settles it." "Settles what?" Mickey demanded. "Annie likes him. Annie's never wrong about people." That night, after the children had gone to bed, Cole sat in the kitchen with Danny. The boy had appeared silently in the doorway, and without a word had sat down across from Cole at the table. They stayed like that for long minutes, the fire crackling softly, the wind whispering outside. Two wounded souls keeping watch over a house full of sleeping children. "You don't have to trust me," Cole said finally. "Not yet, but I hope someday you will." Danny's expression didn't change, but he didn't leave either. And after a moment, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, held it out to Cole, palm up. A chess piece, a white knight carved from bone, worn smooth by years of handling. "It was my father's," Danny said, and his voice was rusty from disuse, barely above a whisper. It was the first time Cole had heard it. "He gave it to me before he died. Told me to give it to someone I trusted." Danny's eyes met Cole's directly, and in them, Cole saw all the weight this boy had been carrying, all the pain and loss and fear that had stolen his voice for 2 long years. "I trust you," Danny said. Cole took the chess piece carefully, feeling the weight of it. Not just the physical weight, but the weight of what it represented. This boy, who'd been silent for so long, who'd watched and waited and judged, had finally found something worth breaking his silence for. "I'll take care of it," Cole said, his own voice rough with emotion. "And I'll take care of you. I promise." Danny nodded once. Then, without another word, he stood and walked away, leaving Cole alone with a small piece of carved bone and a promise that felt heavier than any burden he'd carried in the war. The next morning came with weak winter sunlight filtering through windows that Rose had finally allowed to be opened. Cole stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the children emerge from the house, one by one. Mickey raced toward the barn to check on the horses. Emma followed at a more sedate pace, Sophia beside her. Annie burst through the door and launched herself at his legs. "Morning, Papa," she said, and the word hit him like a physical blow. Papa. "Good morning, sweetheart," he managed. Lily came next, moving slowly, her huge eyes still wary. But she paused beside Cole, reached up, and touched his hand. "Morning," she said softly. It was only her second word in 3 weeks, but it landed like a benediction. Danny emerged last, looking exhausted but somehow lighter. He nodded at Cole, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had passed between them, and headed for the barn. Only Rose remained inside. Cole found her in the kitchen, standing at the window, staring out at nothing in particular. "You should eat," he said. "Not hungry." "Rose." He waited until she turned to face him. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about letting yourself be a child again." She wrapped her arms around herself, defensive. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if there's enough of that left in me. But I want to try," she said, and her voice was so small, so young. "If you'll help me." Cole crossed to her and put his hands on her shoulders. "Whatever you need, however long it takes." "Even if I push you away? Even if I test you and doubt you and make everything harder than it needs to be?" "Especially then." He smiled gently. "Because that's what parents do. They put up with the hard parts because the good parts are worth it." He paused. "And Rose, the good parts are really, really worth it." Her eyes welled with tears. Then, slowly, hesitantly, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on us." "Never," Cole said, holding her tight, this fierce, wounded girl who'd been carrying the weight of the world since long before she should have had to. "Never, Rose. You're my daughter now. All of you are my children, and family doesn't give up." They stood there in the morning light, the sounds of the other children drifting in from outside. Mickey's laughter, Emma's gentle voice, Annie's excited chatter, the sounds of a family being born from the ashes of grief and loss. Cole thought about the gun he'd held just 2 days ago, the choice he'd almost made. And he thought about Margaret, about how she would have loved these 7 broken, beautiful, resilient children. The wind outside carried the promise of spring, still months away, but coming. And for the first time since October, Cole Thornton believed he might live to see it. The letter arrived on the 8th day, delivered by Tom Walker along with the morning mail. Cole recognized the official seal immediately: Children's Aid Society of New York. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, standing alone in the study, while the sounds of children's laughter drifted in from outside, where Mickey was teaching Lily how to throw snowballs. The paper felt heavy, official, final. "Dear Mr. Thornton," it began, and Cole's eyes moved down the page, drinking in words that would change everything. "Regarding your inquiry about the child known as Annie, our records indicate that a female child matching your description was brought to our offices by a woman who identified herself as Emily Whitfield, née Thornton, of San Francisco, California." Cole's breath caught. Emily, Margaret's little sister. Mrs. Whitfield was gravely ill at the time of surrender. She provided no documentation for the child, except a brief note stating that the girl's name was Abigail and requesting that she be placed with a good family. Mrs. Whitfield passed away 2 days later at St. Mary's Hospital. She is buried in an unmarked grave at the city cemetery. The room seemed to tilt. Emily, dead. Margaret's baby sister, the one who'd gone west to find her fortune and found only death. And Annie, little golden-haired Annie, was her daughter, Margaret's niece, the only family Cole had left in the world. He read the letter 3 times, his hands shaking harder with each reading. Emily had died alone and sick in a city 3,000 miles from home. Her last act, putting her daughter on a train heading west with nothing but hope and a ragged doll. Had she known about Margaret's death? Had she tried to reach them? Or had she simply trusted that someone, somewhere, would take care of her little girl? Cole didn't realize he was crying until a small hand tugged at his sleeve. Annie stood there, looking up at him with concern in those familiar eyes. "Why are you sad?" He knelt down, bringing himself to her level. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm happy." "You're crying." Sometimes people cry when they're happy, when they find something they thought was lost forever. Annie considered this with the seriousness of the very young. "Like when I found Rosie," she said, holding up her ragged doll. "I lost her once on the train, and when I found her again, I cried too." "Yes," Cole's voice cracked. "Exactly like that." "What did you find?" He looked at this child, this miracle who had been delivered to him through tragedy and coincidence, and something that might have been grace. "You," he said softly. "I found you, Annie. I found family." Annie smiled, that bright, trusting smile that broke his heart and healed it at the same time. "Good. I was hoping you'd find me. Mama said you would." She hugged him then, her small arms wrapping around his neck with surprising strength. And Cole held her close, this gift from his dead wife's dead sister, and let himself believe that maybe God was paying attention after all. Rose found him still kneeling on the study floor, Annie wrapped in his arms, the letter crumpled in his fist. "What happened?" Her voice was sharp, ready for danger, ready to protect. "What's wrong?" Cole looked up at her, and whatever she saw in his face made her stop cold. "She's Margaret's niece," he said hoarsely. "Annie. Her sister Emily died in New York. Alone. Sick. She put Annie on that train, hoping someone would find her, take care of her." Rose's eyes moved to the little girl, still clinging to Cole's neck. "You're sure?" The society confirmed it. He held up the letter with trembling fingers. "Emily Whitfield, née Thornton. It's all here. Margaret wanted children so badly. We tried for years, and now her sister's daughter is here." Rose's voice softened in a way Cole had never heard before. "That's not coincidence. That's fate. Sophia would say it's God's will. Maybe Sophia's right." Annie pulled back from Cole's embrace, looking between the two adults with curious eyes. "Why is everyone acting funny?" Rose knelt down beside them. "Because we just found out something important, sweetie. Something good." "What?" Rose looked at Cole. He nodded. "Mr. Thornton's wife," Rose said gently, "was your mama's sister. That means he's your uncle, Annie. Your real family." Annie's face scrunched up in concentration, processing this information with the gravity of a judge delivering a verdict. Like a papa?" The question hung in the air. Cole felt his heart stutter, skip a beat, restart. "If you want," he managed. "Only if you want." Annie considered this, her small hand reaching out to touch his face in that way she had, that unconscious echo of Margaret's gestures. "Mama said family would find me. She said to wait and be brave, and family would come." Annie smiled, radiant and certain. "You came." Cole pulled her close again, burying his face in her golden hair so the others wouldn't see the tears streaming down his cheeks. His daughter, not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the mysterious workings of a universe that sometimes, just sometimes, gave broken people what they needed most. Rose stood quietly, giving them the moment. But when Cole finally composed himself enough to look at her, he saw something new in her expression. Not just acceptance, but understanding. "You really aren't going to give us up," she said. It wasn't a question this time. Never. She nodded once, then turned and walked away. But at the doorway, she paused. "Cole," she said, and it was the first time she'd used his given name. "Thank you for not making this about blood, for not choosing her over the rest of us. You're all my children now, Rose, every single one of you. Blood doesn't make family. Love does." She didn't respond, but as she walked away, Cole could have sworn he saw her wipe her eyes. The news spread through the household like wildfire. By supper time, all 7 children knew that Annie was blood-kin to Cole, that she was Margaret's niece, that everything had changed, and yet somehow nothing had changed at all. Mickey's reaction was immediate and loud. "So Annie's actually related to you? Like, for real? That's incredible. Does that mean she gets to stay forever? Do we all get to stay forever? Are we all related now? We're not related by blood, but are we still family?" "Blood is something you're born with," Cole said patiently, ladling stew into bowls. "Family is something you choose. I chose all of you." Mickey stopped, his perpetual energy momentarily stilled. "Even me? Even though I'm wild and I talk too much? And I break things?" "Especially you, Mickey." The boy's face crumpled. For a moment, Cole thought he was going to cry. But Mickey was too practiced at hiding weakness for that. Instead, he launched himself at Cole in a fierce hug that nearly knocked them both over. "I never got chosen before," Mickey whispered into Cole's shirt. "Not once." Cole wrapped his arms around the trembling boy. "You're chosen now, and that's not going to change." Emma and Sophia took the news with quiet acceptance. Emma smiled her gentle smile and said she'd known all along that Annie was special. Sophia nodded solemnly and announced that the Lord worked in mysterious ways, which surprised no one. Lily, as always, said nothing. But when Annie toddled over to show her the crumpled letter, not understanding what it said but knowing it was important, Lily reached out and touched Annie's golden curls with something like wonder. Danny was the last to react. He had been standing in the corner throughout the conversation, watching with those unreadable eyes. When the others had asked their questions and shared their feelings and settled back into the rhythm of the evening, he moved toward Cole. They stood face to face in the flickering firelight, man and boy, survivor and survivor. Danny reached into his pocket and pulled out the white knight chess piece Cole had returned to him that morning. For a moment, Cole thought the boy was going to give it back permanently. Instead, Danny held it between them, a bridge, a promise. "I know what it means," Danny said, his voice still rough from years of disuse, but growing stronger. "To find family when you thought you'd lost everything." Cole nodded, understanding flowing between them, without need for more words. "My father," Danny continued, and the words came slowly, painfully, like drawing splinters from a wound. "He wasn't perfect, but he loved me. And when those men came, when they hurt him, he fought. Not to save himself, to give me time to run." "You tried to save him," Cole said quietly. "I tried. I failed. You survived. That's what he wanted. That's what any father would want." Danny's eyes welled with tears he'd been holding back for 2 years. "I miss him. I miss my dad so much." "I know, son. I know." The boy's composure finally shattered. He lurched forward and Cole caught him, holding him as 12 years of grief and rage and terror came pouring out in harsh, gasping sobs. The other children gathered close, forming a protective circle. Not touching Danny, giving him space, but present. United. A family bound not just by shared suffering now, but by shared love. Rose stood apart, watching, the last holdout. The one who'd learned too well that hope was a weapon that could be turned against you. But she didn't leave. And when her eyes met Cole's over the tangle of children, something passed between them, something that looked almost like trust. That night, after the younger children had been put to bed and the fire banked, Cole sat on the porch with Rose and Danny, watching the stars come out over the frozen Wyoming landscape. "What happens now?" Danny asked quietly, his voice hoarse from crying, but somehow lighter. "We're a family now, officially. So what happens next? What does our life look like?" Cole considered the question. "I suppose it looks like this. Working the ranch together, learning and growing together, having good days and bad days, but facing them together." Rose sounded almost disappointed. "That's it? Just normal life?" "Normal life is a gift, Rose. Trust me. After everything we've all been through, normal is the greatest blessing we could ask for." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I guess I never really knew what normal felt like. Not since I was little." "Then we'll figure it out together. All of us." Danny leaned back, his face tilted toward the sky. "The stars look different now." "Different how?" "Less cold, maybe? Less far away?" He glanced at Cole. "That probably sounds stupid." "No, I know exactly what you mean." They sat in comfortable silence, three wounded souls who'd found their way to each other through tragedy and chance, and something that might have been grace. The wind whispered through the pines, the house behind them glowed with lamplight, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, lonely and free. "Papa," Rose said softly, and the word fell between them like a stone into still water. "Yeah?" "Thank you for not walking past us on that platform, for seeing us when everyone else looked away." Cole felt his throat tighten. "I should be thanking you. You saved my life, Rose. All of you did. I was drowning before you came. You gave me a reason to swim." The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. The night grew colder. But on the porch of the Thornton Ranch, three people sat together in the warmth of newfound family, and the darkness didn't seem quite so dark anymore. Inside, Annie slept with her ragged doll clutched close, dreaming of a mother she'd lost and a father she'd found. Lily curled beside her, no longer alone in her silence. Emma, Mickey, and Sophia shared the next room, their breathing steady and peaceful. And downstairs, the fire burned low but steady, warming a house that had been cold for too long. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Blackwood wouldn't give up easily. The territorial authorities would need to be convinced. Winter would get harder before spring arrived. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, 7 children slept safely under a roof that was finally, truly home. And Cole Thornton, who had stood before his wife's grave just 8 days ago with a gun in his hand and death in his heart, sat on his porch, surrounded by the sound of living, breathing family, and knew with absolute certainty that he had a reason to see another sunrise. The ride to Laramie took 2 days through bitter cold and treacherous trails. Cole left before dawn on the 10th morning, Tom Walker's promise to check on the children ringing in his ears like a vow. Rose stood on the porch, watching him go, her face unreadable in the pre-dawn darkness. The younger ones clustered behind her like chicks around a hen, their breath fogging in the frozen air. "Come back," Annie had called out, her small voice carrying across the frozen yard. "Promise you'll come back." "I promise, sweetheart," Cole had said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. 3 days, 4 at most, but promises were fragile things. and Cole knew better than anyone how easily they could shatter. The territorial court in Laramie was a grim building that smelled of old paper and stale tobacco, the kind of place where lives were decided by men in dark suits who'd never known real hardship. Cole spent his first day navigating the maze of clerks and officials, each one pointing him to someone else, each one requiring different forms and signatures and fees. The bureaucracy was its own kind of torture, designed to wear down anyone without money or connections or infinite patience. By the second day, he'd finally reached Judge Cornelius Blackwood's office. No relation to Silas, Tom had assured him, though the name still made Cole's jaw tighten. The judge was older than Cole expected, silver hair swept back from a weathered face, eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. He reviewed the guardianship papers in silence, his expression giving nothing away. 7 children, the judge said finally, setting down the documents. That's ambitious, Mr. Thornton. It's necessary, Your Honor. Necessary. Judge Blackwood leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Mrs. Eleanor Harwick of the Children's Aid Society has filed a formal objection to your petition. She claims you're unfit to care for these children, that you have a history of violence, that you've bypassed proper procedures. Cole felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice level. I served in the war, Your Honor. The violence was in defense of my country. As for procedures, I filed papers the day after I took the children in. I've done everything by the book. She also claims you've been coaching the children, teaching them what to say to investigators. That's a lie. Perhaps. The judge pulled another document from his desk. But it's a lie that carries weight when it comes from an official representative of a respected organization. He paused. I've also received a letter from Silas Blackwood. No relation to me, I should note. He wants 2 of your boys for his mining operation. Offered to make a substantial donation to the Territorial Orphan Fund if I ruled in his favor. Cole's blood ran cold. His hand instinctively moved toward where his gun would have been, finding nothing. I can't be bought, Mr. Thornton. The judge's voice hardened. That's what I'm telling you. Blackwood made a mistake thinking otherwise. I've been a judge for 30 years. I've seen men like him come and go. They always think money can solve everything. Hope flickered in Cole's chest like a candle in a storm. Then you'll approve the guardianship? I'll approve it. Judge Blackwood pulled out an official seal. Conditionally. The word hung in the air like a sword. You have 6 months to prove this arrangement is working. During that time, you'll receive quarterly visits from a court-appointed inspector. If any concerns arise, the matter will be revisited. The judge pressed the seal firmly onto the papers. Those children have already been failed by every adult in their lives, Mr. Thornton. If you fail them too, the consequences won't just be legal, they'll be human. Cole took the sealed papers with hands that trembled slightly. I won't fail them, Your Honor. See that you don't. The ride back felt longer than the ride out, exhaustion and relief warring in Cole's chest. He pushed Dusty as fast as he dared, the sealed papers tucked safely inside his coat, his mind already back at the ranch with his children. His children. When had he started thinking of them that way? When had it stopped being an obligation and become the truest thing he knew? He crested the final ridge as the sun was setting on the 3rd day, expecting to see lamplight glowing in the windows, smoke rising from the chimney, the warm signs of life and family. Instead, he saw darkness. Standing in the yard, illuminated by torchlight, was Silas Blackwood. With him were a dozen men, some Cole recognized as ranch hands from Blackwood's spread Others were strangers with hard faces and guns on their hips and cruelty in their eyes. And in the center of them all, huddled together in the cold, were the children. Rose stood at the front, her lip bleeding again, arms spread wide in the protective stance Cole had seen on the platform 2 weeks ago. Behind her, the others pressed close. Danny's face was a mask of barely controlled rage. Mickey trembled with fury. Emma clutched Sophia, Lily, and Annie like she could shield them with nothing but her body. Cole's vision went red. He drew his revolver and spurred Dusty forward, the horse's hooves thundering across the frozen ground. The men scattered at his approach, but Blackwood held his position, that oily smile spreading across his face like a disease. "Ah, Mr. Thornton," Blackwood said smoothly. "We were just keeping your little family company while we waited for you." "Get away from them." Cole's voice was death itself, the voice he'd used in the war when he was about to kill someone. "Now." Now, there's no need for hostility." Blackwood's smile didn't waver. "We're all civilized men here." "I said get away from them." Blackwood's smile finally faltered. He pulled a paper from his coat with theatrical flourish. "I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, while you were gone, I received some very interesting information. It seems one of your children, the silent one, Danny, is wanted for questioning in connection with a murder in Kansas City." The world stopped. Cole looked at Danny. The boy's face had gone white, his composure cracking for the first time since Cole had known him. "That's a lie," Rose spat. "Is it?" Blackwood held up the paper. "I have here a warrant for the arrest of Daniel James Whitmore, age 12, wanted for questioning in the death of Marcus Whitmore, his father." The silence that followed was absolute. The father Danny had watched die. The man whose death had stolen Danny's voice for 2 long years. The trauma that had broken this child and never quite healed. "You're twisting the truth," Cole said, his gun still trained on Blackwood. "That boy didn't kill anyone." "The warrant says otherwise, and until the matter is settled, I'm authorized to take him into custody." Blackwood's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Of course, if you were to reconsider my earlier offer, if you were to release the children into my care voluntarily, I might be persuaded to lose this warrant. Accidents happen, after all. Papers get misplaced." "You son of a—" Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. It would be so easy. One shot, and Blackwood would never threaten his family again. But that would make him a murderer, would leave the children without a protector, would prove every terrible thing Mrs. Harwick had said about him. He lowered the gun. Blackwood's smile widened. "A wise choice. Now, shall we discuss—" "No." The voice came from behind Cole. He turned to see Tom Walker riding up, badge glinting in the torchlight, followed by Deputy Marshal Hawkins and 4 other men. "This ranch is under territorial protection," Hawkins announced, his voice carrying across the yard with the weight of law behind it. "Mr. Thornton's guardianship has been approved by Judge Blackwood himself. Any attempt to remove these children without proper legal process will be considered kidnapping." Silas Blackwood's face twisted with rage. "That warrant is 3 years old and already dismissed by the Kansas City court." Hawkins held up a telegram. "I checked. The boy was questioned and cleared. His father was killed by debt collectors when Daniel was 10 years old. The boy tried to intervene and was nearly killed himself." The marshal's voice hardened. "He's not a suspect. He's a victim." Cole felt the world tilt. He looked at Danny, at this child who'd been carrying that weight alone for so long, who'd watched his father murdered and been blamed for it, who'd lost his voice to trauma so deep it might never fully heal. "You knew," Cole said to Blackwood, and his voice was hollow with fury. "You knew that warrant was invalid. You used it anyway." "I used what tools were available to me." Blackwood's mask of civility was cracking. "I'm a businessman. I do what's necessary." "You used a child's worst nightmare as a weapon." Cole stepped forward, and something in his face made Blackwood's men back away. "You dug up the worst thing that ever happened to him and threw it in his face in front of his family. For what? Land? Money? Power?" "I do what's necessary," Blackwood repeated, but his voice had lost its confidence. "You're a monster." Cole's voice was soft now, deadly soft. "And I swear to God, if you ever come near these children again, I will end you, law or no law, consequences or no consequences. I will end you." Blackwood looked at the men around him, at Hawkins and Walker and the others, and saw no support, just cold judgment. "This isn't over," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "Yes, it is." Hawkins stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted kidnapping, harassment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The next few minutes passed in a blur. Blackwood sputtering protests, his men melting away into the darkness, the official process of arrest and documentation playing out in the cold night air. But Cole wasn't watching any of it. He was on his knees in the frozen dirt, surrounded by 7 children who clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to wash them away. "You came back," Annie sobbed into his shoulder. "You came back. You came back. He said you weren't coming. The mean man said you'd left us like everyone else." "I told you I would, sweetheart. I promised." Cole pulled back to look at each of them, checking for injuries, for trauma, for breaks in the spirits he'd worked so hard to mend. "I will never leave you. Do you understand? Never." Rose stood apart, arms wrapped around herself, her bleeding lip trembling. She looked younger than she had in weeks, more vulnerable, more afraid. "Rose?" She shook her head, not meeting his eyes. "I couldn't stop them. I tried. I fought. But there were too many. And they—" Her voice broke. "They just walked right in. Like we were nothing. Like everything we built was nothing." Cole stood and crossed to her. He took her face in his hands, gentle, despite the rage still burning in his chest. "You protected them. You stood between those men and your family, knowing you couldn't win. And you fought anyway. That's not nothing, Rose. That's everything." "I was so scared." The words came out like a confession, like a sin. "I'm always so scared. I have to be strong for them, but I'm so tired of being scared." "Then let me be scared for you, sometimes. Let me carry that weight." "I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to stop being the one who holds everything together." "You learn, day by day, the same way I'm learning to be a father." Cole wiped the blood from her lip with his thumb. "You're 14 years old, Rose. You shouldn't have had to grow up so fast. But you did. And now it's time to let yourself be a child again. Even just a little." She stared at him, her defenses crumbling, all the walls she'd built to survive finally coming down. And then, for the first time since he'd met her, Rose Whitmore let herself cry. Not the controlled tears of someone managing their emotions, not the silent weeping of someone afraid to be heard, but real tears, loud and messy and raw. The grief of a child who'd been carrying an impossible burden for far too long. Cole pulled her into his arms and held her while she sobbed. The other children gathered around, forming a protective circle, the same way they'd circled around each other on that platform, but different now, stronger, united not just by shared trauma, but by shared love. "I've got you," Cole murmured into Rose's hair. "I've got all of you. You're safe now. You're home." Later, after the lawmen had left and the children had been fed and warmed and tucked into bed, Cole sat alone in the kitchen with Danny. The boy had been silent since the confrontation, not the watchful silence of before, but a heavy, wounded silence that filled the room like smoke. "You don't have to talk," Cole said, "but I want you to know something. What happened to your father wasn't your fault. Not then, not now, not ever." Danny's hands clenched on the table. "I've seen men die. In the war, after the war, I've seen death up close, and I know what it does to the people left behind. The guilt, the wondering if you could have done something different, if you'd been faster, stronger, braver." A muscle jumped in Danny's jaw. "The answer is no. There's nothing you could have done. You were a child facing grown men with weapons. The fact that you tried to save him, the fact that you survived, that's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to honor." "I couldn't protect him." Danny's voice cracked, rusty and broken. "I watched them hurt him, and I couldn't do anything. You were 10 years old. I should have been able to stop them. If you'd been able to stop them, you'd be dead. Your father knew that. That's why he wanted you to run. That's why he fought. Not to save himself, but to give you time to escape." "How do you know that?" "Because it's what any father would do. It's what I would do for any of you." Danny stared at him, the walls behind his eyes beginning to crack. "I've been angry for so long. At the men who killed him. At myself for being too weak. At God for letting it happen. I've been so angry I couldn't even speak. The words just stopped." "And now?" "Now, I don't know. I'm still angry, but I'm tired too. Tired of being silent. Tired of being alone with it." "You're not alone anymore, Danny. You haven't been since you stepped off that train." "I know." Danny's eyes welled with tears he'd been holding back for years. "That's the part I can't figure out. Why you? Why now? Why would you want a broken kid who can't even talk?" "Because you're not broken. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken things get thrown away. Wounded things get healed. And healing takes time and patience and someone who gives a damn." Cole reached across the table and gripped Danny's shoulder. "I give a damn, Danny. About you, about all of them. And I'm not going anywhere." Danny's composure finally shattered. He lurched forward and Cole caught him, holding the boy as 12 years of grief and rage and terror came pouring out in harsh, gasping sobs. "I miss him," Danny choked out between sobs. "I miss my dad so much." "I know, son, I know." They stayed that way for a long time, the fire crackling softly, the wind whispering outside. A man who'd lost his wife and a boy who'd lost his father, finding in each other something neither had expected to find again: family. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Winter sunlight streaming through windows Rose had finally allowed to be opened. Cole stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the children emerge from the house one by one. The ritual had become familiar in just 2 weeks, comforting in its predictability. Mickey burst out first, already bouncing with energy as he raced toward the barn to check on the horses. Emma followed at a more sedate pace, with Sophia beside her, their heads bent together in quiet conversation. Annie came next, launching herself at Cole's legs with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never learned to doubt love. "Morning, Papa," she said, and the words still made his chest ache in the best possible way. "Good morning, sweetheart." Lily came slowly, her huge eyes still wary, but warming day by day. She paused beside Cole, reached up, and touched his hand. "Morning," she said softly. It was becoming easier for her, these small words, these tiny declarations of trust. Danny emerged last, looking exhausted from the previous night's emotional purging, but somehow lighter, as if crying had lanced a wound that had been festering for years. He nodded at Cole, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had passed between them, and headed for the barn, where Mickey's excited chatter was already echoing. Only Rose remained inside. Cole found her in the kitchen, standing at the window, staring out at nothing in particular. Her shoulders were set in that familiar defensive posture, but something about her seemed different this morning. Softer, maybe, or just tired of being hard. "You should eat," he said. "Not hungry." "Rose." He waited until she turned to face him. Her eyes were red from crying, but clear, present. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about letting yourself be a child again." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if there's enough of that left in me. But I want to try." The words came out small, uncertain, so unlike the fierce girl who'd stood on that platform ready to fight the world. "If you'll help me." Cole crossed to her and put his hands on her shoulders. "Whatever you need, however long it takes." "Even if I push you away? Even if I test you and doubt you and make everything harder than it needs to be?" "Especially then." He smiled gently. "Because that's what parents do. They put up with the hard parts because the good parts are worth it." He paused. "And Rose, the good parts are really, really worth it." Her eyes welled with tears, but she was smiling too, a real smile, the kind that transformed her face from that of a weary soldier to that of a 14-year-old girl who'd finally been given permission to stop fighting. She stepped forward slowly, hesitantly, and wrapped her arms around him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on us." "Never," Cole said, holding her tight. "Never, Rose. You're my daughter now. All of you are my children, and family doesn't give up." They stood there in the morning light, the sounds of the other children drifting in from outside. Mickey's laughter, Emma's gentle voice, Annie's excited chatter about something she'd found in the snow. The sounds of a family being born from ashes and loss, and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. Spring came slowly to Wyoming that year, creeping across the frozen land like a promise that had almost been forgotten. Cole stood at Margaret's grave on the first truly warm morning in March. The children scattered across the property behind him. He could hear Mickey's laughter from the barn, Emma's gentle voice singing as she worked in what would soon be a garden, the younger ones playing some game that involved a lot of running and shrieking. "You should see them now," he said quietly to the headstone. "They're different, stronger, happier." Rose smiled yesterday, really smiled, not the fake one she uses when she's trying to hold everything together. And Danny told a joke at supper. "A joke, Margaret. The boy who didn't speak for 2 years told a joke, and everyone laughed, and he looked so surprised, like he'd forgotten he could make people happy. The wind stirred the new grass around the grave, carrying the scent of wildflowers just beginning to bloom. Spring in Wyoming was always late, but always worth the wait. I wish you could meet them. Annie especially. She looks so much like Emily, but she's got your spirit, that stubborn, beautiful, never-give-up spirit. She asked me yesterday if you're watching from heaven. I told her yes. I hope I wasn't lying. He knelt down and touched the cold stone, feeling the letters carved there. Margaret Ann Thornton, beloved wife. The words seemed inadequate for everything she'd been, everything she'd meant. I'm doing my best. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if I'm the father these children deserve, but I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. His voice roughened. And I think maybe that's what you'd want. Not perfection, just effort, just love. Papa? He turned to find Annie standing a few feet away, her golden hair catching the morning light like a halo, her ragged doll dangling from one hand. Hey, sweetheart. Are you talking to the pretty lady? Yeah, I was telling her about you. Annie moved closer, her small face serious with the gravity only young children can manage. What did you tell her? That you're brave and kind, and you make me smile every single day. Did she say anything back? Cole smiled, that ache in his chest that was becoming so familiar. Grief and love tangled together so tightly he couldn't separate them anymore. She said she's proud of you, and she's glad you found your way home. Annie considered this, then nodded with satisfaction. Good. I'm glad she's glad. She held out her free hand. Emma says breakfast is ready. She made biscuits, the good kind with honey. Cole took her hand and let her lead him away from the grave, back toward the house where 6 other children were waiting, back toward the life he'd built from the ashes of everything he'd lost. The court inspector came in late April, a tired-looking woman named Clara Pemberton, who had clearly seen too much suffering to be easily impressed. She spent 3 days at the ranch, observing everything: meals, chores, lessons, the way the children interacted with each other and with Cole. She asked questions, hundreds of them, and took notes in a small leather book that never left her hand. On the evening of the 3rd day, she sat down with Cole in the kitchen while the children played outside, their laughter drifting in through the open windows. I've seen a lot of situations like this, Mr. Thornton, she said, her voice neutral, professional. Single men taking in orphans. Sometimes it works. More often, it doesn't. And your assessment of this situation? Mrs. Pemberton was quiet for a moment, her pen tapping against her notebook. Then she closed it with a decisive snap. I've never seen anything quite like what you've built here. Those children aren't just surviving, they're thriving. She stood, tucking the notebook into her bag. Rose, her file says she hasn't laughed in 3 years. She actually laughed during my interview, more than once. Danny spoke to me voluntarily, told me about the chess piece he gave you, said it was the most important thing he owned, and he trusted you with it. And Lily, that child was diagnosed as permanently nonverbal. The trauma was considered irreversible. She called you Papa in front of me. Twice. Mrs. Pemberton's professional mask slipped just for a moment, revealing something that might have been wonder, or might have been grief for all the other children she'd seen, who hadn't been so lucky. Do you understand how remarkable that is? Cole shook his head, genuinely at a loss. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just loved them. Yes, Mrs. Pemberton smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. That's exactly what I mean. She extended her hand, and Cole shook it. "I'll file my report with Judge Blackwood. I'll recommend that the conditional period be waived and full, permanent guardianship be granted immediately." The words took a moment to register. "You're serious?" "I don't joke about children's welfare, Mr. Thornton. You've done something extraordinary here, whether you want to admit it or not. Those children are lucky to have you." She paused at the door. "And I think, maybe, you're lucky to have them too." After she left, Cole stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The children were still playing, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. He thought about the gun he'd held just 6 weeks ago, the choice he'd almost made, the darkness he'd almost surrendered to. And he thought about 7 children standing on a train platform, wearing labels that told lies about who they were. Sometimes salvation came from unexpected places. Sometimes the people you saved ended up saving you right back. The letter from Judge Blackwood arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by Tom Walker, who wore a grin so wide it threatened to split his face. "Read it," Tom said, practically vibrating with excitement. "Go on, read it out loud." Cole read it 3 times before he trusted himself to speak. Then he gathered the children in the living room, his hands trembling, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. "What's wrong?" Rose asked immediately, her old wariness surfacing. "What happened?" "Nothing's wrong." Cole held up the letter, and his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "This is from Judge Blackwood. About the court." 7 faces went pale. Mickey stepped closer to Danny. Emma pulled Sophia and Lily against her sides. Annie's grip on her doll tightened. Even Rose, who tried so hard to be strong, couldn't quite hide the fear in her eyes. "He says," Cole continued, and now tears were running freely down his cheeks, "he says the conditional period has been waived. He says Mrs. Pemberton's report was the most positive she's ever filed in 20 years of inspections." He looked up at his children, because that's what they were now, officially and forever. "He says you're mine, legally, permanently, irrevocably mine. All of you. The adoption is final. No one can ever take you away again." Silence. Then Annie let out a shriek of joy and launched herself at him. Mickey followed a second later, then Emma, then Sophia. Lily came more slowly, but she came, wrapping her thin arms around his waist with surprising strength. Danny stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief, until Cole reached out one arm and the boy crashed into the embrace with a sob that might have been relief or joy or both. Only Rose remained apart, standing by the window, her face unreadable. Cole gently disentangled himself from the others and crossed to her. "Rose?" She shook her head, her voice breaking. I don't know how to feel. I've wanted this so badly for so long. A real family, a real home. But I was so sure it would never happen. So sure someone would take it away." "No one's taking anything away," Cole said firmly. "Not now, not ever. This is your home, Rose. You're my daughter. And nothing is going to change that." Rose looked at him, all her walls finally crumbling, all the armor she'd built to survive finally falling away to reveal the frightened, hopeful, desperately loving girl beneath. "Papa," she whispered, using the word for the first time. Cole pulled her into his arms and held her while she sobbed. This fierce, brave girl who'd been a mother to 6 children before she was old enough to be one herself. Rose who'd fought grown men to protect her family. Rose who'd finally allowed herself to be someone's child again. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got all of you. Forever." That night, after the celebrations had wound down and the younger children had been put to bed, Cole sat on the porch with Rose and Danny, watching the stars come out over the endless Wyoming sky. The air was warm, carrying the promise of summer, of long days and growing things, and life continuing in its ancient rhythm. "What happens now?" Danny asked quietly, his voice still rough, but growing stronger every day. "We're a family now, officially. So what happens next? What does our life look like?" Cole considered the question, looking out at the dark shapes of the mountains against the star-filled sky. "I suppose it looks like this. Working the ranch together, learning and growing together, having good days and bad days, but facing them together, building something that lasts." Rose sounded almost disappointed. "That's it? Just normal life?" "Normal life is a gift, Rose. Trust me. After everything we've all been through, normal is the greatest blessing we could ask for." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I guess I never really knew what normal felt like. Not since I was little. Not since before." "Then we'll figure it out together, all of us." Danny leaned back, his face tilted toward the sky, and for the first time since Cole had known him, the boy looked peaceful. "The stars look different now." "Different how?" "Less cold, maybe. Less far away." He glanced at Cole, a hint of his old uncertainty returning. "That probably sounds stupid." "No, I know exactly what you mean." They sat in comfortable silence, three souls who'd been broken by loss and trauma and the cruelty of an indifferent world, who'd found their way to each other through chance and choice and something that felt an awful lot like grace. The wind whispered through the pines. A coyote called in the distance. And on the porch of the Thornton Ranch, a family sat together in the gathering dark, and the world felt almost right. "Papa," Rose said softly, and Cole would never get tired of hearing that word from her lips. "Yeah?" "Thank you for not walking past us on that platform, for seeing us when everyone else looked away, for choosing us when no one else would." "I should be thanking you," Cole said, and meant it with his whole heart. "You saved my life, Rose. All of you did. I was drowning before you came, drowning in grief and guilt and the terrible weight of survival. You gave me a reason to swim. You gave me a reason to live." The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, indifferent to human suffering and human joy alike. But here, on this porch, under this vast sky, three people sat together and understood that sometimes, just sometimes, broken things could be made whole again. Not by magic, not by luck, but by the simple, stubborn choice to love when love seemed impossible, to hope when hope seemed foolish, to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. Inside the house, 5 children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were wanted, that they were loved, that they finally had a home that no one could take away. And outside, under the endless stars, Cole Thornton sat with his daughter and his son, and knew with absolute certainty that he had found what he thought was lost forever. Not just survival, but something far more precious. Purpose. Joy. The simple, profound gift of waking each morning to the sound of children's laughter. 7 children had taught him that. 7 children who'd been labeled as unwanted, as broken, as worthless. 7 children who turned out to be the most valuable things he'd ever known. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming rain, of growing things, of summer just around the corner. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new sorrows. But tonight, this moment, was perfect in its imperfection, complete in its incompleteness. Tonight, a family sat together under the stars, and that was enough. Summer arrived in a blaze of heat and possibility, transforming the Wyoming landscape from white desolation to golden abundance. The ranch had never looked better. Fences mended by Mickey's enthusiastic, if occasionally haphazard labor, stood straight and strong. The barn gleamed with fresh paint applied by Danny's careful, methodical hands. And in what had once been Margaret's rose garden, now tended with devotion by Emma and Sophia, flowers bloomed in riots of color that would have made her weep with joy. The children had grown into their roles like seeds finding purchase in good soil. Mickey worked with the horses, his endless energy finally channeled into something productive. Danny had become Cole's right hand with the cattle, communicating with looks and gestures more than words, but speaking when it mattered. Emma managed the household with quiet efficiency, her gentle nature making her the natural mediator when tensions rose. Sophia had taken over the kitchen garden, coaxing vegetables from the earth while murmuring prayers over each seedling. And Lily, who had been silent for so long, was talking now. Not constantly, not easily, but talking. Her voice was like a small bird learning to sing, tentative and precious, and growing stronger every day. One evening, as the family gathered for supper, Lily climbed into Cole's lap uninvited, something that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. She looked up at him with those huge gray eyes that had seen too much suffering for someone so young. "Papa," she said, and the word still felt like a gift every time she used it. "You know what I like best about being here?" "What's that, sweetheart?" "Nobody calls us names anymore. Nobody puts papers on our coats. Nobody looks at us like we're bad." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes held depths of remembered pain. "We're just regular kids now." Cole felt his throat tighten. "That's because you're not bad, Lily. You never were." "I know that now." She smiled, a real smile, bright and trusting. "You taught me." After supper, while the older children took the younger ones outside to catch fireflies in the warm twilight, Cole stayed behind, washing dishes. Rose appeared beside him, picking up a towel without being asked. "Let me help." "You don't have to." "I want to." She began drying the plates he handed her, working in comfortable silence for a few minutes before speaking again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about normal life being a gift." "And?" "You were right. All of this, it's everything I ever wanted. A home, a family, people who care about me not because they have to, but because they choose to." She paused, carefully drying a bowl. "I didn't think places like this existed. I thought they were fairy tales people told to make you hope for things you'd never have." "They don't exist by accident," Cole said, handing her another plate. "They have to be built. By people who refuse to accept that the world has to be cruel. By people who choose kindness even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Rose was quiet for a moment, working through something in her mind. "I want to help other kids someday, kids like us who've been thrown away. I want to show them that it doesn't have to be the end of their story, that there are people who will choose them, who will fight for them, who will love them even when they're difficult and scared and broken." Cole looked at her, this fierce, brave girl who'd become his daughter in every way that mattered. "That's a good dream, Rose. A noble dream." "You think I could do it?" "I think you could do anything you set your mind to. And I think any child who finds their way to you will be the luckiest kid in the world." Rose's eyes welled with tears, but she was smiling too. That transformation from weary soldier to hopeful girl that never failed to move him. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder the way a daughter might rest against her father, and Cole felt the last broken piece of his heart finally click into place. The anniversary came on a warm June morning, 1 year to the day since Cole had stood at Margaret's grave with a gun in his hand and death in his heart. He woke early, before the children, and made the walk alone as the sun rose over the mountains. But he wasn't alone for long. One by one, all 7 children appeared, forming a solemn line beside him. "We wanted to come too," Mickey explained, his usual exuberance muted by the solemnity of the moment. "To say thank you." "Thank you to Mrs. Margaret," Annie stepped forward, clutching a handful of wildflowers, "for sending you to find us. Sophia says she must have asked God to help, and God sent you." "That's what I believe," Sophia confirmed, her dark eyes serious and knowing beyond her years. "The Lord works through people. He worked through you." One by one, the children approached the grave, each leaving something. Annie laid down her wildflowers with solemn care. Mickey placed a small wooden horse he'd carved himself, the work clumsy but heartfelt. Emma contributed a ribbon from her hair, pale blue and carefully ironed. Sophia recited a prayer, her voice clear and strong in the morning air. Lily whispered something too quiet to hear, but her lips moved with obvious intention. Danny laid down his father's chess piece, then, after a moment of consideration, picked it back up. Not ready to let it go completely. Not yet. Rose went last. She knelt beside the headstone and placed her hand on the cold marble, her voice steady when she spoke. "I never met you, but I know you must have been something special, because the man you loved, he saved us, all of us. He gave us a home and a family and a future." She paused, her voice thickening with emotion. "I promise I'll take care of him the way he takes care of us. I'll make sure he's never alone again." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft from being carried for weeks. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "I wrote something," she said quietly. "I've been waiting for the right moment." She cleared her throat and began to read, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Dear Mrs. Margaret, you don't know me, but you saved my life. Not just by sending your husband to that train station, but by loving him so well that he knew how to love us. I spent 2 years being a mother to 6 children when I was barely more than a child myself. I never thought I'd have a real family. I never thought I'd be allowed to be 14 again." Rose's voice cracked, but she continued. "Your husband gave me something impossible. He gave me permission to stop being strong, to cry, to be afraid, to be someone's daughter instead of everyone's protector. I love him. I need you to know that. I love him the way a daughter loves a father, and I promise I'll take care of him the way he takes care of us." She folded the letter carefully and placed it on the grave, weighted down with a smooth stone. "Thank you for this family. Thank you for him." The other children had fallen silent, watching. When Rose turned, tears streaming down her face, she looked at Cole with an expression of such raw, unguarded love that it stole his breath. "I love you, Papa," she whispered. "In case I don't say it enough, in case something happens, I love you." Cole's vision blurred with tears. When Rose stood, she walked directly to him and took his hand. The other children gathered close, forming a circle around the grave, around Margaret's memory and Cole's grief, and the family they'd built together from the wreckage of their separate sorrows. "We should do this every year," Emma said softly. "Come here together. Remember." "Yes," Cole agreed, his voice rough. "We should." They walked back to the house as a family, the morning sun warming their backs, the future stretching out before them, full of possibility. That evening, Cole gathered them all in the living room. The fire crackled in the hearth, even though it was summer, because some rituals were worth keeping, regardless of the weather.
The curtains, Margaret's curtains, were open for the first time in over a year, letting in the golden light of sunset. "I want to tell you something," Cole said. "All of you." 7 faces turned toward him, attentive and trusting in a way that still took his breath away. "A year ago, I was alone in this house, drowning in grief. I'd lost my wife, my hope, my reason to keep going. I thought my life was over. I was certain of it." He paused, looking at each of them in turn. "Then I walked onto that platform and saw 7 children wearing labels that told lies about who you were. And something inside me, something I thought had died with Margaret, woke up." "You saved us," Mickey said, but Cole shook his head. "No, you saved me, every single one of you, by needing me, by trusting me, by giving me a reason to wake up in the morning." His voice cracked. "I thought I was rescuing orphans, but the truth is, I was the orphan. I was the one who was lost, and you found me." Silence fell over the room, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the soft whisper of wind through the open windows. Then Annie climbed into his lap, as she always did, pressing her small hand against his chest over his heart. "Your heart isn't sad anymore, Papa," she said with the certainty of the very young. "I can feel it." "No, sweetheart." Cole pulled her close, opening his arms to include the others as they gathered around him, drawn by gravity or love or the simple human need for connection. "It's not sad anymore. For the first time in a long time, my heart is completely full." They stayed that way as the sun set and the stars came out. A man who'd lost everything and 7 children who'd been told they were nothing, holding on to each other in a house that had become a home. The labels were long gone, crumpled and scattered by the wind on a cold December platform. But what they'd built in their place would last forever. Cole looked at his children, at Rose's fierce devotion and Danny's quiet strength, at Emma's gentle spirit and Mickey's wild joy, at Sophia's old soul and Lily's fragile trust and Annie's shining love, and knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Not alone, not empty, not drowning in grief, but here, with them. A family forged not by blood, but by choice. Not by obligation, but by love. The wind outside still howled, as it always did in Wyoming, indifferent and eternal. The world was still hard and cold, and full of people who would rather label children than love them. But inside this house there was warmth, there was light, there was laughter and tears and the messy, beautiful chaos of 7 children learning to trust and 1 man learning to live again. They had found each other when they needed it most. They had chosen each other when the world said they were worthless. And they had built something together that no one could ever take away. Because in the end, the labels didn't matter. The past didn't matter. The cruelty of strangers and the judgment of society, none of it mattered. What mattered was this moment, this family, this love. What mattered was that 7 children who had been called unwanted were wanted now, completely and forever. What mattered was that a broken man had found his reason to live, and 7 lost children had found their way home. They were Thorntons now, all of them, bound not by blood, but by something stronger, by the choice to love when love seemed impossible, by the courage to hope when hope seemed foolish, by the stubborn, beautiful, revolutionary act of believing that tomorrow could be better than today. Cole held his children close as the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. He thought about the gun he'd held a year ago, the choice he'd almost made, and he thought about 7 children standing on a platform, waiting for someone to see them. Sometimes salvation came from unexpected places. Sometimes the people you saved ended up saving you right back. The labels had said troublemaker, defective, sickly, wild, strange, mute, unknown. But the truth was so much simpler. They were wanted. They were loved. They were home. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang its eternal song. Inside, a fire burned steady and warm. And in the space between wind and wilderness, between what was lost and what was found, 7 children slept peacefully. A house that had been empty was full again. Hearts that had been shattered were whole again. And Cole Thornton, who had stood before his wife's grave with death in his hands, now woke each morning to the sound of children's laughter and knew he had been given the greatest gift of all. Not redemption, not a second chance, but 7 reasons to live, and each one more valuable than gold.